Hey everybody, welcome to helpyourmath.com. Today we're going to look at how we can solve equations by factoring. Now we've already gone over some methods of factoring. Today we're going to see how we can apply those methods to solve equations. Now there are three basic steps here. We're going to go through each one of these. Start with an example equation. Start maybe a little simple. Something like a squared plus a equal to 0. So our first step when solving equations by factoring is to set our equation equal to 0. So we see that that's done for us. So step one is done. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to factor this equation here. So we went over the GCF method before, which is the idea of pulling out common factors to simplify an expression. So let's do that here. And we see that a squared could be a times a. So we've got a common factor of a here. So let's pull that out. And this can be rewritten then as a plus 1 is equal to 0. And if you need to, you can double check this by just distributing what you factored out back in. So now we see that we've got a simplified equation here, something that we can start solving for our missing variables. Now remember that anything times 0 is equal to 0. So this really isn't just one equation, but kind of two. So we're saying that since we have a 0 here, that one of these things could be equal to 0. A could be equal to 0, or a plus 1 could be equal to 0. So let's see those two scenarios. We have the scenario where a is equal to 0. We have the scenario where a plus 1 is equal to 0. So now we see that we can easily solve for a. A equals 0. That one's done for us. Here, we can just subtract 1 from both sides. These 1's cancel out. We have that a is equal to negative 1. So two possible solutions to this. And of course, you can always check your answers by plugging these back into your original equation and making sure that they still equal the same thing. Now, an important thing to note here is you may be tempted to say, why can't I just divide out this a? If I know that a squared is a times a plus a is equal to 0. Why couldn't I just say divide everything by an a here? I would say that I would have an a, this would become a 1, this would still be 0, 0 over anything is 0. Subtract my 1, a equals negative 1. That's an answer we got here. Why is this not right? Well, the idea is that we don't know what a is here. Say a was a 0, this would be an undefined. It could be anything. We've got two solutions here, but we only found that by factoring. So you can't just jump straight to this to solve these equations. Whenever you have something like this, you always want to start by factoring and then solve each new expression for the given variable. Let's take a look at another example here. Maybe get a little more in-depth with this. So we'll say negative 3a, make that a little clearer. Negative 3a squared is equal to 6a. So again, going back to our steps here, let's start by setting our equation equal to 0. You can do this any way you'd like. I'm going to choose to subtract 6a from both sides, but you could say add 3a squared to each side. It doesn't really matter, as long as you set your equation equal to 0. So these will cancel out. Our new equation is negative 3a squared minus 6a is equal to 0. Now we'll start factoring. This one's got a little more to deal with, but if you just take it step by step, I think it'll be all right. You see that, like we said before, a squared could be written as a times a. So we have a common factor of a here. You can say that 6 could be written as 3 times 2. So we have a common factor of 3. But then really important, we also have a negative sign in front of both of these. So we actually have a common factor of a negative. So we're seeing that we've got a negative, an a, and a 3. So let's pull that out. Negative 3a. And now we'll rewrite our expression. Let's just double check that to make sure that if we distribute this back in, we'll get back to the same thing. Negative 3a times a, negative 3a squared. There you go. Negative 3a times a positive 2 would be a negative 6a. So now we have something that we can start solving. Again, like I said, you have two possible solutions in this. You have one where negative 3a would be equal to 0. And you have another one where a plus 2 would be equal to 0. Now you just solve for your a in both of these. Start by dividing by a negative 3. We'll have that a is equal to 0, or subtract 2 from both sides here. A is equal to negative 2. So again, two possible solutions, but we only would have arrived at this by following these steps. We set our equation equal to 0 first, we factor that equation, and then we'll solve each new expression for the variable in that expression.